All right, what's going on, guys? My name is Zach, and today I want to share with you Klaviyo benchmarks that you should be hitting. So, after 100 plus Klaviyo audits, these are the main metrics that I look at when I'm auditing an account. Number one is the Klaviyo attributed revenue percentage. This is that sexy number that email marketers love to boast about. Everybody looks at it. It just tells you, compared to your overall revenue, how much revenue is email marketing bringing in. Usually, if you're 0 to 20%, there's some major gaps within your email marketing, or you just have a product that sucks. Sorry to say it. 20 to 30%. This is solid, but there's definitely room for improvement. This is a client that we actually just brought on that we are helping out. They're doing okay with their flows. They have them set up, but they're not amazing. They know that they can really dial it up and get to that 30 to 40%. That range is the sweet spot. That's when you know emails are doing really, really well. 33%, that's that a third of your revenue coming from email marketing. That's a great number to hit. 30 to 40% is amazing. After 40%, it's awesome. Emails are crushing it. That's great. However, it tells me that we need to ramp up acquisition. We have so many repeat customers and we have so many people already on the site. They're making purchases that are already in your newsletter that we need to take that money that email is printing at this point and we need to ramp up acquisition. So we need to get more new people into the system and we really just need to ramp up the front end. Brands that are doing like 70% of email marketing, revenue at this point, it tells me that they're not getting new customers through the door and they're just selling to the exact same people over and over and over again, which makes the email marketer look good, but it means overall the brand is probably not growing and adding to this number right here. This number is what needs to be essentially growing and kind of evening things out so you get back to that 30-40% sweet spot. Okay, Klaviyo attributed revenue there. Campaign versus flow percentage. Honestly, I don't like to look too much into this. It's basically the split between campaigns versus flows. I've seen so many fluctuations. I've literally seen massive brands go from 80-20, flipping it completely in reverse to 10-90, then back to 80-20. Like, it makes no sense, honestly, sometimes. Unless one is just severely underperforming, like if one number is less than 20%, okay, cool. Then in that case, either campaigns or flows, you could focus on those and really try to bring that up. But I've just seen massive fluctuations with the exact same strategy month over month. And it also really depends on your brand. If you're a furniture brand, or you're something that you're very high ticket, it's a slow purchase cycle, people don't buy impulsively at all, then yeah, flows are going to do really, really well for you versus campaigns are more of an impulse buy thing. If people are clicking on an email and making a purchase straight away, that tells me it's probably lower AOV. It's more of an impulse buy. People perhaps, have never gotten your product before because it's been out of stock and now it's in stock. And then campaigns can do really, really well. But it depends on so many factors. Don't look too much into this. SMS revenue. Compared to overall Klaviyo revenue, we like to bring in about 10 to 15%. In this case, we're at 12, so we're really, really healthy. We have all these different SMS flows set up, which bring in a ton of revenue. We're sending campaigns on a regular basis. And this is assuming, by the way, that you're using Klaviyo for SMS and you're obviously not using PostScript or Attentive or whatever. But usually 10 to 15% is where we shoot for. If you're under 10 or you don't have any SMS revenue, it's definitely on the table and you could be adding revenue by just implementing SMS into your strategy. Now, revenue per recipient. This is one of these things that I think people really get way overhyped about. I don't like looking at this at all. Not every email is designed to sell. You have a lot of emails that are just trying to nurture and tell a story or tell about the brand or just get people excited about something coming up. They're not going to sell all the time. So I don't like looking at revenue per recipient. There's specific instances where if you're looking at a specific sales focused email versus another sales focused email, perhaps in your flows, that's totally cool. Like, I look at revenue per recipient when we're looking at two different flows and we're A/B testing them. Cool. That's totally great. It's an abandoned cart email. It gives a discount. It's designed to sell. But if you're just looking at overall revenue per recipient, it doesn't tell you a lot. Thing is, you could send way more emails and your revenue per recipient could go down, but your overall revenue goes up. So if you wanted to, and on the other end, if you wanted to max this out, you could just send 10 emails hand typed to your 10 best customers ever. They would all make a purchase. You'd have like $1,000 revenue per recipient, and or you could send an email to your mom and she would purchase. Boom, that's $100 revenue per recipient, but overall revenue would be down. So it's not a great stat to look at because you can, you know, it doesn't tell you how much overall revenue your emails are bringing in. It tells you per person, and you could just reduce the number of people. So I don't like that metric very much. Now, deliverability. I like to look at deliverability as a whole because it affects everything else within the account. If you have horrible deliverability, nothing else is going to work. Your flows are going to go to spam. Your campaigns are going to go to spam. It's never going to work. So we need to make sure this is optimized first. This is huge. So if your deliverability score here, which is sum of open rate, click rate, bounce rate, unsub rate, and spam complaint rates, if that score right there is between 0 and 40%, major deliverability issues. 40 to 60%, it's okay. It's pretty average. A lot of accounts are going to be in this range. Improvements can be made. It's not the most terrible thing in the world. You're probably mostly going to the primary inbox, but it's not like amazing. 60% plus, you obviously want to max this out, but if you're at least at 60% plus, you're in a good spot. The other thing too is that you could send no emails at all and be at like 100. So you got to think about like, what is your strategy? Are you sending, how many people are you sending to? What is this actually bringing back to you in terms of revenue? You have to look at all these factors. You can't just look at deliverability in a bubble. Okay, in terms of the flows, what I like to do is I like to sort the flows, say in the last 30, 90, year, or whatever. I like to sort them by revenue, and I like to look at which flows are bringing the most revenue, which are medium amount of revenue coming in, and which ones are really not bringing in as much revenue as the others. So I order these, and generally the order, when everything's dialed in and everything is just fully optimized, you're going to have your welcome flows and your abandonment flows are going to be your winners. Most likely your main welcome series is going to be in that like top 1, 2, 3 spots. Abandonment flows, your checkout and cart abandonment are going to be big winners. SMS welcome flow, it's going to be somewhere near the top. As you can see, these are kind of ranges. And then you have your post-purchase flows. So your upsells, your cross-sells, your customer thank you flows, probably going to be in the lower third area unless something is really just way off and maybe this super outperforming everything. But for the most part, post-purchase, obviously the purchase has to be made. And so it's not going to get as many people as your welcome and abandonment flows. A couple other ones, VIP flow, it's great. Not going to be a massive revenue driver for you most likely. Win back flow, if you're getting a ton of revenue through your win back flow, it means that there's a lot of customers to win back. So that could tell you a lot. But generally, when a brand's super healthy, win back flow isn't a massive revenue driver. There's not a ton of people. Most people are already engaged. They're in these abandonment flows or in these welcome flows versus a customer that is on the verge of, never talking to your brand again. You don't want that to be like a massive group of people who just don't want to talk to your brand again. A couple other wild cards though. Quiz flow. This one really performs well for certain brands that have it. Skincare brands, hair care brands, things like that, beauty brands. This one does really well if it makes sense and if you actually do have a really good quiz. A lot of times this could be in this like kind of spot right around there. So if you have the opportunity, definitely implement a quiz on your site and implement that as part of your strategy. Replenishment reminder for these brands that you're trying to get people who haven't subscribed, trying to get them into a subscription. Usually does really well after you send that email right after their first 30 days, right after that's about to be up. Send them an email, get them onto the subscription. Does really well. Back in stock flow and birthday flow, these are okay. Unless you have like a ton of products that are just out of stock all the time. Your back in stock flow is probably not going to do amazing. Birthday flow, it happens once a year for whoever wants to subscribe. It does okay. It's a fun one to have in there. I wouldn't say it's a massive revenue driver. So this is generally how I see the order of the different flows, just going from most to least amount of revenue. This is a pretty average case. Pop-ups. We like to look at conversion rates here. If the pop-up is underperforming, it's usually in that 0 to 2% range. A lot of times, yes, it can be the copy and design, but unless you just have horrible copy and horrible design, it's probably an offer issue, and it's potentially your product sucks issue, or you're just not getting enough traffic, you're not getting enough data, you're just not getting enough people there. It's hard to sometimes fix some of these pop-ups that you could have the best copy and design, but if no one wants to sign up for your list because they don't get a good offer, if it's nothing, they're not going to want to convert. So that's what I would say about that. If it's 0 to 2%, probably underperforming. 2 to 3% is solid. Potentially potentially room for improvement and to add revenue by getting more people onto your list. 4% is great. We love to see that. In this case, these pop-ups were doing 4.9, 10.3, 18.5, and 16.5. So these guys are crushing it with these pop-ups, especially mobile. For whatever reason, people on their phones way outperforms people on desktop. We've seen that across so many different accounts, but usually your mobile pop-up is going to outperform unless you're just unless you have a very old demographic that only uses their desktop. We always see mobile outperforming desktop. And 7%. If you're above 7%, like this, that's great. Make it a case study. It's awesome. That's awesome. Keep crushing it. Love to see that. Campaigns. So open rates. This is the biggest thing with deliverability. We need to make sure we have great open rates on our campaigns. It's going to affect everything else in the account. So less than 28%, we definitely need improvements. 28 to 35 is pretty average. We want to bump it up just a little bit. But if I see that in the account, I'm fine with it. I just say, hey, let's do a few tweaks. Let's increase these just a little bit. 35 to 45%, great sweet spot. 45% plus is awesome. It probably means that you can send to a wider group of people. So you can kind of see here in our 180-day engaged, if we're getting 45% plus open rates, at that point we can expand it out to 270-day engaged or whatever it is. Or we can just think about how can we send to more people within the list, assuming that you're using some sort of engagement segment. Click rates. This one's a tough one. Click rates have been absolutely all over the place. We've seen in 2024 click rates 10, 12, 80%. It's been insane. Now they're at the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Most accounts that I see are in that like 0.5 to 1.5% range. Honestly, it makes no sense. So to give you a generic, just throughout everything, if it's less than 0.5%, we want to improve it. 0.5 to 1.2%, pretty average. 1.2% plus is a great spot. If it's above 2%, that's amazing. And overall, sometimes you're selling ice to Eskimos and people just don't want to buy at that moment. I like to look at not this in a vacuum. I don't like to look at just, this particular click rate, this click rate over here. I like to look at all of these combined. I like to look at it over the course of the month. I don't like to look at it just in isolation because, again, some brands are going to do really well with flows and some are going to crush it with campaigns. And some brands, someone might get a campaign, they might get a campaign, they might get a campaign, they might get a campaign. That happens so many times and then they convert off a flow. Especially if you have a long sales cycle, these campaigns are more for nurturing. So I would look at the overall account revenue versus how much each individual campaign brings in. I would just really caution you on looking at campaigns, individual metrics as the end all be all. Last but not least, placed order revenue. Again, I like to look at overall revenue for the month. Some campaigns are going to crush it. Some are more nurturing. I just like to look at see which campaigns did especially well, try to do more of those. But I don't like to look at the individual revenue for each one unless I'm comparing between the two. This, for example, this campaign right here, if it only did $948 versus this one that did 14.2. Yes, that's important. However, this one could essentially set the stage for a 20K campaign that comes next. It could just get people hyped. So I like to look at these on the per month or the per 3-month basis, not just like individual campaigns. Got to have a little bit of both. It's a balance for sure. But overall, I like to look at metrics not in a vacuum. All right. And that was it. That was what Klaviyo metrics should I be hitting. So at this point, if you want help hitting all these metrics, if you want to add 10 to 35% to your monthly revenue, do me a favor, go to zhs-ecom.com. It's zhs-ecom.com. Book a call there. Speak with me. Talk about how we can add revenue to your email marketing in the next 90 days and take your brand to the next level by implementing everything that I talked about here, getting you to that 33% plus Klaviyo attributed revenue. Looking forward to seeing you on that call.